Good morning, everyone. We are going to present our working papers for what would originally be happening in the CIS, but we're here at virtual CIS, so everyone can watch this whenever and wherever. Um, we are students from the Stanford Graduate School of Education. I'm Hugo from Brazil. We have Daniela Gamboa from Peru, and we have Salomé Aguilar from Mexico. And what unites us, first and foremost, is our geographical locations. We are from Latin American countries, which are extremely diverse in culture, but they also share socioeconomic, historical, and geographical characteristics that require them to deal with income and educational inequalities. One common fact for Brazil, Mexico, and Peru is their appearance on the list of the 40 most unequal countries in the world, based on the latest information provided by the World Bank in its Gini index. And also, PISA results situate all three countries. We have a new participant.
Okay.
Okay. And as I was saying, the PISA results situate all three countries in the below average list, ranking them at the bottom 15 countries in education scores. A large number of empirical studies collaborate to the understanding of educational inequality, providing specific information about how Latin America's countries fight it and stretching the knowledge over the effect of policies on educational quality. Our works will focus on specific themes. Daniela Gamboa's work explores the boundaries of Peruvian education policies concerning teacher professional development with the results of national teachers' assessments. My work purpose is to seek a correlation between Brazil's expansion of preschooling with increases in test scores in the early years of elementary education. And both of these studies can be characterized as more structural efforts in relation to our title here of research, as they are focusing on the consequences of public policies on the educational system. However, it is also crucial to grasp an individual's preference, assuming its power of choice inside a social structure. And Salomé Aguilar's study explores the factors or characteristics students and their families consider when they choose a school, and if these factors vary across individuals from different socioeconomic status, different regions of the country, or diverse levels of school achievement. So to end this introduction, this panel will contribute to the acknowledgement of specific factors associated with social constraints and individual options inside three different societies that share historical backgrounds of income and educational inequalities. Teachers training, preschool expansion, and school choice all relate to the phenomenon of test scores, which are the most predominant way of addressing schools quality on contemporary agenda. Thus, we hope to contribute to the field with our research. To start, we're going to have Daniela Gamboa presenting. So I will pass to her.
Thank you very much, Hugo. Well, as Hugo said, my name is Daniela Gamboa. I'm from Peru, and my MA paper proposal is focused on policy making for teaching quality. So basically, what I'm going to do is an analysis of teacher assessment as a relevant input for Peruvian professional development policies. So can you pass? Thank you. My study basically deals with the relevance of data-driven decision-making for the design of teacher professional development. So teachers have been recognized as critical factors to drive student learning and achievement, but extensive evidence shows that they have huge knowledge and skills gaps that governments have tried to address by designing professional development policies and programs, and Peru has actively followed this trend during the last decades. However, there is very few evidence of the effectiveness of these interventions, and there's contrasting literature about the results of professional development policies and programs. So several studies describe different reasons for the failure of professional development to improve teachers' skills and student outcomes, while others highlight the elements of effective professional development that have shown gains in student performance. Under this approach, most of the literature around professional development is focused on the impact of these policies on teaching quality as measured by student performance. Yet, very few connect these proposals with the diagnosis of teachers' improvement areas, generally measured in teacher evaluations. Next, please. So considering the relevance of the this connection for the design of pertinent policies, my study explored the purpose of Peruvian teacher professional development policies and the extent to which they are based on the evidence provided by national teacher assessments, specifically by the Prueba Única Nacional, the PUN. The PUN, it's an evaluation that is taken nationwide by teachers to access to the teaching public career, which is called Carrera Pública Magisterial en el Perú. And basically what these public careers aims is to locate teachers in public schools and get them tenure positions. So this is the main way that teachers have to access to this teaching career. Next, please. So there's a lot of previous work that has been done on the field, basically around two main areas: assessment as a policy tool and effectiveness of teacher professional development. So with the increase of access to education, concerns about quality of educational systems have raised, which has led to a growing culture of assessment and evaluation. These efforts are generally focused on measuring the outcomes of education as a student achievement, and several studies have addressed the role of teachers in this process. However, there are a lot of authors, like Baker and colleagues, Darling Hammond and Neal, that have pointed out the bias that basing teacher education on student test scores might generate. As a result, the direct assessment of teachers' skills and knowledge has become even more central to understanding teaching quality. And of course, considering there is a significant association between these skills and student outcomes, Bruns and Luke have developed a very huge and interesting study about what teachers really need to continue performing on schools. The use of assessment, however, has been focused on measuring education efficiency and using this information for operational decisions, for example, teacher selection and teachers promotion, and the way that evaluation results inform educational policies remains understudied. Furthermore, one of the most recent studies by Loyalka and Popova and colleagues show through a large-scale randomized evaluation that a national professional development in China and its associated interventions failed to improve teacher and student outcomes after 1 year. Other studies, on the other hand, describe the positive effects of specific professional development programs, but all of them show caution when generalizing the results to different settings and fail to address the consideration of teachers' skill diagnosis for the design of the interventions. Next, please. So, in order to provide a deeper understanding of the design process and purpose driving the Peruvian professional development policies, I will discuss the topic through the lens of Schoen's reflection in action and Wheeler's compensatory legitimation theories. So based on these theories, I explore and interpret the Peruvian professional development policies as either driven by compensatory purposes or based in professional learning theories that aim the improvement of teaching quality. The use of evidence regarding teachers' skills in policymaking processes would be related to a practice-based approach, meaning that policies are built bottom-up and that they promote the capacity of practitioners to reflect their own practice and generate knowledge. While, on the other hand, the sole establishment of priorities related to teacher professional development might represent a top-down process of policy design, which would explain a reciprocal legitimation between power and knowledge. In that sense, I argue that professional development policies in Peru do not address teachers' skills gaps and are designed to legitimate the state's role. Therefore, I expect to find a conflict between the competences measured at the PUN, the evaluation, and the priorities establishment in the policies. Next, please. So in order to explore the purpose of Peruvian teacher professional development policies and the extent to which they are based on the teacher evaluation, I developed what Bork and colleagues identify as the third research paradigm, which is a mixed methods research. This approach is highly recognized because it provides a very informative, complete, balanced, and useful results on research. In this case, the merging of the findings from the quantitative analysis and the qualitative analysis will allow me to deeply understand what are the Peruvian teachers' improvement needs and what is the perspective of the government about the most pertinent teacher professional development goals. So these convergent mixed method designs weighs equally the quantitative and the qualitative phases of the study. For instance, the analysis of policy-related documents issued by the Peruvian government attempts to answer my first research question: what is the main purpose of Peruvian teacher professional development policies? Then, the statistical analysis of the PUN scores in 2015 aims to provide a response to another of my research questions, which is what is the contribution of PUN to the professional development policy design? What do teachers really know? What are their strengths and what are their weaknesses? And the comparison of both findings is expected to inform my last research question, which is basically the extent to which these policies are evidence-based. In the first stage, I develop a statistical analysis of the extant quantitative data, describing what are the differences of teachers' scores based on their age, their gender, years of experience, the type of higher education institution they attended to, their geographical settings, and the level and subject that they teach. In addition, I use bivariate correlations to identify the strength and direction of the relationship between the variables concerning teacher demographics, background, and test scores. Based on the associations, I ran regression models that control for different variables. Second, the qualitative process of my study consists on a document analysis of state-produced documents from Peru. These are basically public laws, sectoral policies, strategic plans, policy documents, and law regulations, which will be revised and coded using both an emergent and a deductive calculation. Finally, I develop a
Tengo que pagar hoy día, ¿no? 2.50.
Sorry, okay. Okay, so finally, I will develop a side-by-side comparison between the quantitative and the qualitative findings within a discussion, analyzing the convergence or the divergence that would allow to answer the main research question of my study.
Okay.
Okay, next, please. So some information about the data I would like to share with you. The quantitative data is basically the individual performance of Peruvian teachers in a nationwide Peruvian assessment process. As I told you, it's the Prueba Única Nacional, taken in 2015. The Peruvian Ministry of Education compiled information and delivered an official report for the purpose of this research. And they are analyzing to make this data available so that any other researcher could use this and generate information and knowledge for the country. So the data set holds the results of over 190,000 teachers that applied to access the public teaching career, the CPM, a Peruvian format that recruits teachers for tenured positions in public schools. The percentage of women and the average age of the participants is very similar than the national average teachers statistics. So we have 61% of the participants that are women and that have an average age of 39 years. So this might provide a very strong external validity for the findings of my research. On the other hand, the qualitative data comes from the documents issued by the Peruvian government concerning teacher professional development. So basically, as I mentioned, these are public laws, sectoral policies, strategic plans, policy documents, and law regulations. A comprehensive list of the current professional development policies was provided by the Ministry of Education, from which I developed a purposeful sampling strategy, intentionally selecting specific documents based on a time criteria that ranges from 2016 to 2020. The reason for establishing this criterion responds to the need of providing a time lag between the first application of the PUN, the assessment, which was in 2015, and the publication of the policies, in order to understand the extent to which the policies may be data-driven by the information of the test. As mentioned previously, the analysis of the qualitative data will be driven by inductive codes that identify the emerging topics related to professional development in the documents, and also by deductive codes informed by the quantitative data and the conceptual framework of my study. So next, please. So I'm still on progress. This is a work in progress, but based on the review of the literature and the results of a pilot study I conducted the previous month, I expect the quantitative data to show a curvilinear relationship between the experience of teachers and their PUN scores, meaning that the increase of years of experience would be associated to the increase of test scores until a specific point when scores start decreasing. This trend would be explained by the incompatibility of senior teachers' education and the competence-driven approach of the current test. In addition, I expect the data to show a variance between teachers' basic competences skills, basically reading and writing, and the pedagogical content knowledge, based on the level of teaching. So this finding would show that teachers of the secondary levels require an improvement of their pedagogical content knowledge, while on the other hand, teachers of lower levels, like preschool teachers or elementary teachers, would require the strengthening of their basic competence skill, but would have a very strong pedagogical skills. So regarding the qualitative data, I expect a divergence from the variables measured in the PUN, meaning that the documents analyzed will likely lack direct reference to teachers' improvement areas. However, contrary to my initial ideas, I expect the documents to address broad and deep dimensions of teacher professional development based on theoretical frameworks. Based on these projections, I expect the findings to show that teacher evaluation, as currently designed, doesn't provide enough information to inform policymaking concerning teacher professional development, and that a deeper connection between instruments and policies is required. So I am really looking forward to deepen on the analysis of the data and be able to provide further findings on the topic. And I believe, as I stated in my initial slide, that teachers are the cornerstone of quality education, and a deeper understanding of what is the purpose of professional development and what are the real needs will help us to design pertinent programs that support them on the challenging role of developing the full potential of every student. Thank you. So now, I guess we have some time for questions. We have some participants. It's good to see you, Vivian, Stefano. So if you have any questions, this is a great time to do them. You can just type them. You can speak in Spanish if you want to, and I'm happy to answer them.
Salo, you have one?
Yes, I have a question, Danny. You were saying towards the end of your presentation that you think that the policies that are being implemented now may not have a mechanism for them to get feedback on their own, like working. What I'm thinking is maybe this PUN evaluation, how often does that happen? Like, could you follow up on the policies that are being made now, if they have an impact on teachers' learning, like in the future, and PUN. So not only that, what I understand is you're trying to see how PUN informs the policies now. Will there be data available to see how policies now affect PUN in the future?
Yeah, so the data is really rich. PUN is taken every year, and there's a lot of teachers taking it because of the public teaching career really provides a great opportunity for teachers to be promoted in a different salary scale. So yeah, it could inform future decisions too, but I guess like the main focus of my study is to try to understand how are we designing professional development policies if we don't consider the information of what are teachers' skills and weaknesses. But yeah, we could do it the other way too. I mean, first, we would have to establish a connection between the policies and what the PUN is actually assessing, because I think that's where the the break point is. The PUN is looking at a specific set of skills of teachers, which is basically math, reading, and pedagogical content knowledge. But the policies are aiming at a very different thing. They are just trying to build an integral development of the teacher and are focused on the national curriculum. So yeah, I guess it would be interesting to think the other way and just try to find the common points between these two elements.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now I have a question for you.
Go ahead.
I really enjoyed your images, mainly on the conceptual framework and the research design, on you explaining the aspects that you were going to explain quantitative and the aspects that you're going to explain qualitatively. And I am wondering, so on quantitative, you're focusing on the test score for teachers, right?
Yes.
This is the focus. Okay. And on the qualitative, you are seeing if the alignment between what is written on the official documents
Mm-hmm.
and what they have on the test scores, right?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know if you already started that, so if you didn't start it yet, I can ask another thing. But like, are you seeing this alignment between what they say is their purpose and what they actually measure in the test scores? And yeah, and also I would like, when you said about you were explaining the conceptual framework, you said something about top-down approach that comes from the state, and also a bottom-up approach that would be the teacher's practice itself. I would like to know more about that too.
Great, thank you for the question. So yeah, I did my pilot study with data from the PUN of 2018. So it was a more recent data, and I could easily see that yeah, they are not being connected. The policies are not being built under the information that the test provides. And I got the chance to talk to a bunch of people of the Ministry of Education, and they acknowledge this. They know these processes were started in different periods of time and under different perspectives. So they are, I mean, there's a huge effort to get teachers evaluated, but for this basically access and promotion process. But this information is not designed in a way that could inform policymaking. I mean, it's very concrete and specific. So yeah, there's no connection. I just want to find and provide evidence of this and get some recommendations to make it better. And yeah, what I meant by top down and bottom up basically is this, no? So if I have information and evidence of how things are going on and what are the real needs of teachers, this should be the starting point to start thinking on how to design programs that support teachers, of course. And I mean, theoretically, it sounds really, it sounds obvious, but of course that there's a lot of things going around, and the PUN has some specific objectives, and the policies are aiming a more constructive and general approach, like competence-based, and trying to just improve student outcomes based on this general idea of how the national curriculum would be. So, I mean, I think it's basically how to say this, like a structural weakness that the Peruvian educational system has, that we have like tiny offices that are working towards quality education, and they are doing a great job, but the interconnection and the communication between each of them is not very strong. So if we could have this general approach of what we should do and how things should be, maybe these processes could be more connected. And I know that like the latest and the most recent policy I'm going to review will be the national guidelines for teacher professional development, which was approved 1 month ago. So probably this document has a different measure that's trying to get everything together. We'll see. But if not, this is something that even the officers of the Peruvian Ministry of Education know, and that they are working to make it better.
That's a really important finding. Okay, just to use the last minute that we have for the question section. So what are the PU and test scores being used for, if not to inform policymaking?
Just to hire teachers and promote teachers.
They're
So,
used for hiring processes.
Yeah, 12% in 2018, only 12% of teachers that took the test approved it. So of all the teachers of the more than 190,000 that took the test, 12% were assigned to tenure positions in public schools. So yeah, this is like the main objective of the test, just to set a threshold, and the ones that get through it are tenured in schools. But yeah, I think we could do a lot more with that information.
For sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Okay, I think that now we go for Salomé's presentation.
Okay, so hi, I'm Salomé. I studied economics and now I'm doing the master's at International Education Policy Analysis at Stanford with Hugo and Dani. And I'm gonna present today on my master's thesis, which is called The Effect of Changing the Teacher Hiring Process on Parental School Choice in the Mexican State of Zacatecas. So what I'm gonna try to look at is how a policy change that started evaluating teachers before hiring them could change and shape the preferences of parents when they choose a school for their children. First, I want to tell you a little bit of the background. So there are, before we had this reform, we had a reform in 2014 that established this new hiring process, which consists on evaluating the teachers before hiring them. But before that, the system was ruled by teacher unions. And this is described very nicely by Chambers and Finger in 2018. This is a paper that talks about how back then, before 2013, teachers were never evaluated. They didn't even have to study anything related to pedagogy. They didn't have to know the materials to be hired, but rather the positions were inherited, sold, or given to people with the strongest political connections. This created a system that was completely the opposite from a merit-based system, where, but it was rather a system where teachers that were more prone to being corrupted would get into the system. So with the reform that happened in 2013 and was implemented in 2014, the government created the Servicio Profesional Docente, which is a professional teacher service that was supposed to hire the teachers based on evaluations. But these evaluations would not be made by the SPD, but rather by the National Institute for Evaluation of Education, which is a completely separate institute that has a constitutional autonomy, so it cannot even be influenced by the government. So this INE institute would evaluate the teachers and pass on the information to the SPD, and the SPD would have to hire them according to their qualifications on the tests. So this was very controversial because it took away the power from the unions to hire the teachers. But on the other side, it created a merit-based system that I am gonna argue increased the teacher quality. So here I have a headline of an article of The Guardian in 2013, where you can see that the Mexican education reform passed the Senate, and immediately there were street protests against changes to aim to improve school results and take the power away from the unions. So these protests happened very, very heavily in the southern states of Mexico. That is the reason why I decided to concentrate my study in a state in the northern part of Mexico, and I chose the state of Zacatecas because it not only is in the northern part of Mexico and had a very smooth implementation of the reform, but it also has very good quality data and a very open government that is sharing their data with me. So that's the reason why I decided to base on Zacatecas. So I'm going to argue that the reform improved the quality of the teachers. Here I have a kernel density where you can see the red line is the distribution of test scores. These are standardized. That's the reason why the mean is 0. So this is the distribution of test scores of teachers that were hired before the reform. These test scores are from when they were in high school. So what I did is I merged the database of teachers that were hired before and after the reform, and I tried to look for them in high school and see how they were performing in high school in a standardized exam called Enlace. So you can see how the teachers that were hired before the reform have a mean 0 and have a very high density below 0, which means some of the teachers were even below average on the state level. Whereas after the reform was implemented, the distribution shifts to the right and has a higher density, like above the mean. This would only be important if test scores would be a good predictor of teaching quality, and I try to argue that they are. So here I'm citing a couple of papers where overall in the literature we can see that the correlation or with test scores of teachers and their teacher value added is positive. And it tends to be small, but its positive is there. So that's the reason why I argue that this new set of teachers that were hired post the reform are better teachers. Just a quick note, the teacher value added is measured as the difference that the students learn after being with the teacher. So it takes fixed effects of teachers and students, and the fixed effect of the teacher is the teacher value added. And it's a common measure for teacher quality in economics. So now I want to try to, what I want to try to disentangle is whether parents pay attention to this feature of the school, which are teachers. Do they look at the teachers before they choose the school? If the school has better teachers, would they tend to look at that school and pick it as their first choice for their children? So normally you could argue that when parents are choosing a school, they look at different features of the school. One of them could be the distance from the school to their home. So for that, I look at a study that tries to see how like an expansion in public transportation makes students choose other schools outside, like farther away, just because the commuting time decreased. This is a study done by Dustin and Ngo in 2018. Then we also want to see whether the teacher characteristics are important. So there is a paper in 2005 from Jacob and Lefken, where what they do is they try to see how a survey that informs parents on the characteristics of the teachers at a school can shape their decision of which school they pick, and they see that it does. It is a very important feature that they take into account. We could also argue that they look at the school facilities before they choose a school, or that they look at the school performance on standardized tests. This would be the peer effects, saying like you would like to go to a school where the students are fairly good so that they influence in a better way your child. So these peer effects have been proven to work, and by Hawksby and Weingart, so it's a reasonable feature that parents would look at before choosing a school. So my main research question is whether parents demand of schools increase when the school hires a teacher through the merit-based system, which is the one implemented by the reform after 2014. So first, I used the data of Zacatecas to prove all the hypotheses that I said before. And you can see how, so I'm going to explain this table first. Here we have, I estimated a conditional logic model. So here we have odds ratio, which means if the number is bigger than 1, it means that this feature makes the school more attractive to parents. If the measure is smaller than 1, it means that it's less attractive. This number is always between, it's always a positive number, so we don't have negative numbers here, but smaller than 1 would mean a negative relationship. These are only correlations. So we can see that a longer distance to the school makes the school less attractive because it's farther away. We can see here is the student is better than the average school in math. That means the peers are worse than the student that is gonna apply, and you can see how this is indeed negative. So students are looking, or parents are looking for schools where their children perform better. So here we have the same measure, but when the school is, when the student is worse or has a lower average than their peers, and we can see that this makes the school more attractive to parents. And we can see also physical characteristics of the infrastructure of the school, like the library, cafeteria, the dining hall. These all seem to be attractive characteristics. You can see how the dining hall has a negative coefficient, a negative relationship. This could be because dining hall, like schools that have dining hall programs, tend to be for poorer students. So that might be an unattractive feature of schools. Then we also have whether they have a nurse, a parent association, internet. This also makes it more attractive. So now I'm going to talk about my identification strategy. What I propose to use are instrumental variables. So first, I want to talk a little bit about my identification threat. What I want to see is I have a school, and I want to see if they receive a new teacher, which was hired through the merit-based system. So it's proven to be a better teacher if we believe that the score is a measure of teacher quality. So we have a school that hires a better teacher. But now, and we want to see whether the demand of the school rises or not. The problem is, it could happen that in reality, the school was growing anyways, it had a high demand, and therefore it hired a new teacher. So once they hire a new teacher, they're still growing, the demand is growing. So I'm gonna think the demand is growing because the teacher was hired, and in reality, the teacher was hired because the demand was growing anyways. So this is my main identification threat, and this is something I have to control for. And so what I'm gonna propose to use is an instrumental variable. I have two ideas of an instrument, and I'm gonna explain each of them. My first idea of an instrument is using the vacancies. So I'm not gonna look at the teachers that the school hires, only hires. I'm gonna look at the teachers that the school hires because they have a vacancy. So they have a teacher leaving, so this is creating the necessity of the school to hire a new teacher, and it should not be correlated to the demand. What could happen though with this instrument is that maybe the school was losing demand, and so it has a vacancy, but it has a vacancy because it didn't have students anyways. So this vacancy is not a good predictor of hiring new teachers, so it wouldn't be a good instrument. So in that case, if I use vacancies, I need to control with preschool trends, just to make sure that I'm not capturing a decrease in demand before the school. Then my second proposed instrument is to use the projection of school enrollment using pre-reform data. So I have several years before the reform, and I can project how the school is growing, and this natural growth of the school before the reform should give me how many teachers is the school gonna hire in the future. And with that, I could instrument it to see what the demand is afterwards because of the teachers and not because of the natural growth of the reform. So what are the assumptions that my instruments need to fulfill? I have two big assumptions. The first one is an assumption of exogeneity, which means that the instrument C cannot be correlated with the error epsilon, which is the error of the second stage. So what does this mean? It means that vacancies cannot be correlated with the demand of the school. So here we see again, like if I don't control for the pre-trend of the school, vacancies could have a problem. But the projection of school enrollment should not be correlated with the future idea of students choosing a school. Then we have another big assumption to make this identification strategy work, which is the assumption of relevance, meaning that the instrument should be a good predictor of the variable that I want to, which in my case is teacher quality or the percentage of new teachers hired through the reform. These two should be highly correlated so that the instrument is a good instrument for the teacher quality. So here I have my first estimation. What I did is, this is only using the number of vacancies. So you can see how the correlation is pretty high, it's significant, and it has an F statistic of 2,000, over 2,000, when it only needs to be 10 to be a good instrument. So I think vacancies at least will be a good instrument, but I still have to run the second stage. So how is it gonna look like? We're gonna have two stages. In the first stage, we're gonna instrument the teacher quality using one of the two instruments that I proposed before. And for vacancies, I will have to control for preschool trends. Once I run this regression, I will estimate the teacher quality using the parameters obtained in the regression, and then run the second stage, which is the conditional logic model, using the instrumental teacher quality, which will be here. And I need to use the same controls in the second stage regression. So I will obtain a very similar table to the one I have here. The only difference will be I will also have information on teacher quality, and these estimates will be causal. The estimate only of the teacher quality will be causal and not only a correlation. What are the limitations of this plan, and what are some next steps that I need to do? First, as I mentioned before, does the exogeneity restriction hold? Are vacancies a good instrument? Could they be correlated with a decrease in demand? This is something I need to control for. This is something I need to look into. Then I'm also concerned about my databases, because I have information on where the students enroll, but not where they apply. So I need to know whether these differ too much from each other, because if they were completely different, then the information on the school where they enroll will give me no information on their preferences, which is what I'm trying to look at. So this is something very concerning, but that I think I can address with data that I have available. So some next steps to solve the exogeneity restriction problem, I will control for vacancies. I will control the vacancies with prior performance of the school, which should help me get rid of the decrease in demand problem. Then for the applying versus enrolling problem, I have the information on the last school year, and I can see whether I have this information. Like I know where they applied and where they ended up enrolling, but for this year, which is not the year that I'm using for the analysis, but at least I could see in what percentage of the cases they don't end up enrolling at the school where they applied to. Of course, any other suggestions would be welcome. And yes, this is my project. So any questions?
Great job, Salo. I really like your project. I guess it's gonna show how important is teacher quality for everything and for life. So I just have a very small question. You talked about the importance of controlling. It's more in the quantitative part, so you're gonna have to be patient with me. So you talked about controlling the like the preschool trend in order to make the instrument relevant, right? So I would like to know, how can you control for a preschool trend? Like, do you have to focus that on the district you're going to analyze, or are you gonna do it like in Mexico, in the world? How do you plan to do this?
Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I will have information on each school. So this database is on a student level and on a school level. So I can see what the enrollment rates are. So how many people are enrolled at the school in the previous years. So what I'm gonna do is just add that to the database as a characteristics of the school, and then just add it to the regression, which you can see here. So here, this vector X means all the controls I'm gonna use. So the controls would be just, what is the enrollment rate 1 year before, 2 years before, 3 years before, 5 years
so
before.
basically it's the trend of the school, not of preschool around the region.
Exactly, it's of the school, because I want to compare schools that have decreasing demand with schools that have a decreasing demand. Like I want similar schools to be compared and not be comparing like apples and pears, you know?
Yeah, I understand. Awesome.
Salo, I also have a question. So looking at your work, I feel that you have great data and great information to talk about these two main reforms, right? Like one is the merit-based system now of hiring teachers, and also the possibility that parents can choose where to enroll their kids in school, no matter the distance of the school, right? And you show how this is an important factor for parents when they are deciding which school to choose. But I was wondering if you know if in Zacatecas, which is the place that you're seeing, if parents indeed have the access, for example, to public transportation, or if they have, like, most of them have cars, because you can have access to choose a school that is further away from your house, but it's better, so you want your kid to be there, but on a material way, you don't have access to do this transportation. So, like, if this is important or not to consider.
Yeah, okay, that's a good question. We have in Zacatecas, these are mainly public schools. This is very important because that means that parents that enroll their children there tend to not have a car because
Okay.
they're rather poor and low income. But what I did is I tried to see which school you choose from a radius around the primary school where the child went. So, like the radius I'm using is 6 kilometers, which I think would be possible to access by public transportation. And I'm also only using in the database parents that have more than one option within their 6 kilometer rate. Because you're right, like if they only have one option and every other option is too far away, then that's gonna bias my results. So I just leave them out of the sample because they live too far away to have more than one option. So I'm just considering parents that have more than one option, and the question is, within the options they have available and close to them, which one would they choose based on the characteristics? So there will still be a variance. Maybe they would want to choose a farther away one, but they're not gonna do it because of the distance.
Yeah.
So I'm not even gonna give them the option.
Cool. Yeah, do you know, like, how big is Zacatecas?
No, it's a big state. I'm using.
Oh, it's a whole state. It's not
a state.
Oh, okay. It's not a. All right. Okay.
So it's not a problem that I'm using the whole state because I'm just I have clusters of parents that have schools closed. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. I think I only, maybe in your next presentation, or because like me, I that come from sociology, I would love to see like a little bit of demographics from Zacatecas.
That's a good idea.
This would be cool, a cool information to have.
Yeah. I can note that. Thank you. Thanks for the comments.
All right.
Shall we move on?
Yes, now it is my turn. Okay, I am going to present also my working paper for the Masters in International Comparative Education. And my research focus on, so this is the main research question, which is, does pre-primary schooling influence primary education achievement? Why am I studying that? Can you please? So these maps show the major reason why I am studying that. This map shows every Brazilian municipality, which I think that the most appropriate correlation with the United States would be counties. So, but the municipalities are the small geographical units in Brazil. We have more than 5,000 municipalities in Brazil. And as you see in the legend on the left, this is a map that shows the enrollment rate of 4-year-old children in Brazil. And it's pretty straightforward and visible that this changes a lot in the last 2 decades. And this big expansion in numbers shows that Brazil has experienced a raise in 4- and 5-year-old enrollments from less than 70% in 2001 to almost 95% last year in 2018. So this expansion is huge, and this is one of my main justifications of the work I'm doing. And also, what happened in Brazil is that in 2009, Brazil enacted a law that made 4-year-old enrollment in the school mandatory. So before that, the first mandatory age for children to be in school was 6 years old and in primary education. So there was no mandatory law for children to be enrolled in preschool, in pre-primary education. And this law changed that. And as an assumption, we believe that this law has influence on this structural changes that we see here. Another reason why I was interested in the theme is that Brazil is a country that experienced huge inequality and achievement gaps between students that belong to different social incomes and different territories in Brazil. Brazil is a continent, basically, right? So you have a lot of inequality within the country. And preschool, in some studies have been considering that preschools are one way to address this structural inequality of students, because if you allow that every single student in the country has access to pre-primary schooling, you increase the chances that they will keep studying throughout the whole educational trajectory. Like, so the dropout rates tend to decrease if you have experienced pre-primary school or not. And also, you are already being introduced to the school system, you're already being introduced to the school language, to school expectations. So this can be a big thing to decrease the achievement gaps between regions and social income groups in Brazil. You can pass, please, Salomé. So what do I have? I am interested in understanding the difference in enrollment rates of each municipality to see how this municipality has changed its test score results in the Brazilian national standardized testing. And I'm trying to link the enrollment rates in pre-primary education with this primary education scores. I am looking at 5th grade test scores, and those are the information I have on the Brazilian municipalities. So there is a lot of, it's a lot of data. I am still organizing them, I'm still understanding them better, but some of them already get my attention. For example, when you look at the Gini index of municipalities, you see that the minimum is 0.3 and the maximum is 0.87. This is a huge difference. There's another amazing difference on the percentage of 10 to 14-year-old children that already work. There are municipalities with 0 and municipalities with 98.5. I think that I definitely have to look at this data to see if this is accurate. But I bet that even if I decrease this percentage, they are in between a 60% difference between municipalities at least. Also, if you look at years of schooling, we have that the mean is 8.3, but we have cases of 2 and cases of 13. So this is a big difference. And these are to show to me that municipalities in Brazil are really different. And this information is crucial in order to understand which municipalities most increase their enrollment, and how different municipalities experience this increase in enrollment, how different municipalities experience the increase in test scores. Because the increase in test scores can also be a factor of, you know, the test scores, they were created in 2007 in Brazil, and there is a possibility that every school is learning, you know, how to do well with them. Teachers are learning better how to teach them, so they might not be exactly correlated with what I'm trying to correlate. But we are designing our research design is trying to capture this specific influence of early childhood education enrollment on test scores. You can stay on the same image, because I am going to talk about a little bit about the literature review that I've done. I think it's important to highlight previous work done on the associations between early childhood education and cognitive development to get a sense of my contribution to the overall literature. First, psychological studies on early childhood education attainment shows consequence in cognitive development. They show that memory, phonological abilities, vocabulary expansion, executive functions, they are all improved due to early childhood education attainment. And the literature shows stronger effects on disadvantaged groups, which was one of the things that I was talking prior. and the fade out effects would be like groups that didn't attain an early childhood education end up having the same educational achievements as those who have attained it during school. I don't, one more person trying to, so I don't see this achievement gap as a sign that early childhood education does not give an advantage to students, but in fact it shows how the quality of further schooling is crucial for the sustainability of these positive effects. In other words, everyone who does early childhood education in theory is beneficiated from the fact that they attended it. And this fade out effect is trying to say that like even students who didn't had early childhood education that end up having the same results in primary education. But then I don't see this as a criticism to early childhood education, but I see this as a criticism of further schooling, because early childhood education alone is not enough for any good result or for the lessening of dropout rates. Okay, so following, because of this fade out effect, the studies that can show long-term adult life outcomes are better. So we can understand what are the long-term consequences of having attended early childhood education. There's a lot of literature on the American, on the United States, and they end up seeing better job attainment and salaries, less crime-related activities. But at the same time, in my case, they lack external validity, as these effects were seen in quality programs with teachers that have bachelor degrees and schools that had small staff-to-child ratios. So they are not really average schools. They are considered more of a privileged school. And on the other hand, developing countries such as Brazil, they are starting to experience early childhood education expansion in the last years, and to develop research on the consequences of the expansion on the educational achievement. And all of the studies so far, mainly Latin America, there is a study on Argentina, on Uruguay, on Bolivia, and Chile, they all show increases on early years of primary school. But I still have no time to long-term adult life outcomes, because they started to really expand their system of early childhood education in the last 5 to 10 years. In Brazil, there is still no research about the association between enrollment in pre-primary schooling and primary school test scores at the national level. So my research will be able to provide information on the average effect of enrollment rates at test scores in Brazilian municipalities, also deepening our knowledge we have on which municipalities most increase their enrollment and what are their characteristics, such as this table is trying to show. You can pass, please, Saulo. This is another important data, because the percentage in the amount of children of 4 and 5 year olds in Brazil in the last 16 years, in fact, from 2000 to 2006, that's what I'm showing, it did not increase. So you would not expect a natural growth in expenditure on pre-primary education, because the number of children are even less in 2016 than it was in 2000. But you can see that the government expenditure of pre-primary education has risen. So it's really important from a public policy standpoint to understand the consequences of this increase of investment. I didn't select an image on my data and method, so I will talk about them meanwhile we keep looking at this graph. I am really fortunate because Brazil has lots of data. So my challenge was to organize them and adapt to my research questions. I aggregated all of them by municipality, created variables of enrollment per age, and I still have to work on merging these municipality characteristics and test scores. I will end up working with 3 or 4 data sources. And because I don't have an randomized control trial or control and treatment groups, I will look at the variation in the intensity that municipalities adopted the reform, in the sense of how much they increase their enrollment rates and how different these municipalities increase this enrollment. We're trying to estimate this in the less biased way possible. So we're assuming that the increase in pre-primary enrollment is not associated with any change on observable and non-observable characteristics of municipalities, which are outside of our model. And if you can go back to the last slide, please, Salo. So for now, we have all these characteristics on our models. and we are assuming that the change in enrollment rates and the change in test scores are not correlated with any of these characteristics of municipalities, because in theory they are controlled in our model, and we will improve the model and improve these characteristics so we have the least biased possible model. In our equation would be something like, we're trying to estimate test scores, and then we have the enrollment rates of in pre-primary education of every municipality. Then we have all those municipality fixed effects, and then we have time fixed effects. You can pass, please. I think there's one more. Yeah. So this would be my conceptual framework, which in fact is looking at a really straightforward relationship, which is how pre-primary school enrollment in a certain municipality in a certain year, and my assumption is that there will be a positive association with fifth grade test scores in municipality I in time t. I did this open-ended sort of square here to represent the time varying municipality observable characteristics, because there are non-observable characteristics. So this is not a really precise and accurate 100% image of the municipality, but they are a sort of framework that we are creating to insert these informations of school enrollment and test scores inside this framework. So this is the conceptual framework. We have all the municipality characteristics, and inside these municipality characteristics, we have the pre-primary school enrollment and the fifth grade test scores. To finish, I have to wonder about the expected findings of this research. I understand that that different income groups and regions will react differently to the reform. I already have some data on that, mainly provided by the National Ministry of Education. And there are states, if you can go back to that first map, Salo, please. To the maps, yes. One more, yeah. Brazil has 5 different regions, and you can see my cursor, so okay. It is possible to visualize that different areas of the country reacted different to the change in enrollment rates. So I expect that this has also a correlation with the change in test scores, because the main assumption is that there is a correlation between enrollment rates and the test scores. I also expect to see these positive associations, and to control for what I was wondering before, that maybe the test scores are just growing naturally. I will look at 9th grade test scores from these municipalities too, to see if they are also increasing in relation to the enrollment rates of pre-primary education. Because on 9th grade, the students who are on 9th grade, they haven't experienced pre-primary education, and they haven't experienced the reform. So I will control for their results in order to have a more structured claim for the 5th grade increases. And also, following the literature, I expect to see stronger advantages, stronger increases in disadvantaged groups. And yeah, that's it. Yes.
Okay, Hugo, I have a question for you.
Okay.
A couple of questions, actually. First is, once you control for all your observables, do you think there could be something that you're not looking at that could be causing this variation in the implementation of the early childhood program, like schooling?
I think it's a question that everyone who's trying to make quantitative studies and trying to have the least bias possible models in order to try to have a causal inference, or to at least have the best correlation possible. This is a question that we have to keep thinking about all the time, right? Like, if there's anything possible, observable or non-observable, that can be correlated to that. I feel that we're trying to get every information related to money expenditure on municipalities, which I think there are a pretty good information on the possibilities of each municipality to increase their enrollment rates in primary education, because you have to expand infrastructure, you have to hire more teachers. And in Brazil, there is a big thing that is lots and lots of low-income families. They only have access to constant food in schools. So there is a expense on that too. So we're trying to have the most we can on information about expenditure in education from municipalities. I think that this is a big thing. I think that what I don't have now in the model, and I think that is really crucial, is some information on teacher quality. From each municipality to because I think this must be correlated with the fifth grade test scores. So if I don't have this on the model, I think this would be a more of a bias. So yeah, there might be something that stays out of the model and could be correlated with the enrollment rates or the test scores, but the goal is to have, you know, a good and accurate explanation of this. And if you have anything that you think that should be, I would appreciate to know.
And I even think like you don't have to ever have information on that. You know, like you can think of things that are difficult to gather information of, but that could still be a threat, just to have it in mind. And maybe, for instance, now I'm thinking of just the motivation, like the motivations of the students. Like you don't know that, and you don't know if you're gonna stay there. Like,
and that's a limitation of quantitative studies overall, right?
Yeah, and another thing that I'm thinking of is density, for example. That's related to the question that you did to me. Maybe like if you have a like fairly low density state or municipality, it is difficult to build schools such that students can attend to it because they're so spread that it's just difficult to get them to go to one center, one school. So even if you invest, children cannot go because they're too far away. Yes. So that could be another thing that could make the process of building the school slower.
For sure.
And the other thing that I was thinking is you're mentioning that you want to control for the ninth grader scores, which you could frame it as a difference in difference, because you have the same states before and after, but in your case, before and after are the cohorts in 5th grade and in 5th grade and in 9th grade. So you just would have to frame it as you would have to write your equation not controlling for them, but rather using them as a control group, as the before and after period. But I definitely think you can do a difference in difference if you have that information.
I will definitely consider that. And just to complement, sorry, Dani. So one of the next steps now is really understanding the difference that municipalities reacted to the reform and to the enrollment rates, to understand this municipality didn't increase their enrollment, but everyone on the surroundings did. Why did this happen? Like, and then you have to check like really specific information. So this is one of the next steps to understand the overall reaction of the municipalities.
Well, I just wanted to congratulate you. I think it's a great study, and of course you have a lot of things to think about, but it's great to go ahead with that. I just wanted, like, as an early childhood teacher, I just wanted like to point out, if I don't know if you have access to this data, but have you considered thinking about like the biological factors that might be driving I mean, if there was no reform, you could even see differences between students and their test scores, right? So that might, if you're focusing the study in a different approach, you might be wanting to think, okay, what happened with this student when he was born, or what were some developmental factors that might be affecting his or her test score? So are you considering something related to these factors to include in your model, or to provide at least some background information?
When you say biological factors, you are relating to?
Basically, like developmental factors of students when they are very young. So between 0 and 1 year old, a lot of things can happen to a child, and that might affect their future performance.
And this would be information on, like mom's health during pregnancy.
Yeah, even I think there almost every Latin American country have this mandatory process of registering information about like vaccination, the I don't know, size and different things that might give you a guess if the child is developing the way he's expected to. So maybe just like
that's
probably
great.
it's a data from the health sector, but just trying to.
For sure, I think it makes completely sense. I don't think there are data on specific ways children develop, but I think that there are data on health issues related to this process of or the pregnancy or the childhood development in this really first early years, for sure. And I think that in some way, as a proxy, right? Like it's also a matter of income. Even if we don't find that, I think that low income families, they have less opportunity to provide actual good health to their infants,
for example.
So I will definitely look for the health information, but if not, I think I will argument on the social economical factor that for sure influences the health, right?
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Okay, I think that this is the end for us. I see that there is a person here if you want to ask any question or say if you got anything from here. It's okay if not to. I don't want to put you on the spotlight. All right. Well, I appreciate everyone who's going to watch in the future. I appreciate everyone who was here with us today. Thank you, Salo. Thank you, Dani. I hope we just keep developing our works and have the best we can. And yeah, this is the end.
Thank you.
Thank you.